This podcast is being recorded and produced on Gadigal land.
We pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this country and elders past present.
We extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today.
Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
I'm Brittney Saunders.
And I'm alright, hey.
And you have made your way onto our close friends list.
Because you don't put the juiciest gossip on your main story, do you? You keep it for your close friends.
And that's exactly what these episodes are for, so let's get into it.
However, this episode today probably going to be a little bit different because we're talking about a bit of a heavy topic. I mean, it's a fun topic in a way because it's Mardi Gras this weekend, which is really exciting. But this year, Mardi Gras has been overshadowed by a lot of things going on, which we'll get into. For starters, you've never been to Mardi Gras, have you?
I know. Cancel me. I really want to go. I guess I've never... Well, I live in Newcastle for one. I'm not here in Sydney. But I don't know. I guess I should have reached out to you any year and been like, can I come? But then, I don't know. I feel like I don't want to say that I feel left out at all, but I feel like you've always been so busy with it. You're always on a float and doing something. So I've never wanted to be like, hey, can I come?
Yeah.
And I guess like... I'm sure I think Wade's definitely gone. Again, just me like not getting amongst it.
Yeah.
Cancel me for it.
And for any of our international listeners who don't realise, Mardi Gras is Australia's Pride Festival, or at least New South Wales, but really it is Australia's.
Yes.
I know other states have other festivals, but it's the biggest one for Australia. It's a huge thing for tourism and whatnot. Actually, I had a little fact here that I thought that people might have liked. Mardi Gras is one of Australia's leading tourist draw cards, and it injects around $135 million into the economy each year.
Wow.
For reference, the Eras tour that just came injected $145 million. So $10 million more, but, you know, Mardi Gras...
That's pretty good.
Each and every year is injecting that much into the economy. So it's a huge draw card for tourists. It's our Pride Festival here. It runs for about 3 weeks, but there is ultimately this big parade that happens at the end to celebrate the end of the Mardi Gras season. And that's when you say Mardi Gras, that's what people think of. Mm-hmm. And that's what I mean when you've never been, which I will admit you probably would hate. Like, there's so many people. There's like 500,000 people watching and... on the streets are packed, the streets are closed, the trains are closed, the toilets are closed. Like,
what?
They've got portaloos, but the toilets are closed. The toilets that are always there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Public toilets are closed, but they bring in portaloos.
Right. Which, by the way, I fucking hate portaloos.
I know, and they bring in troughs as well.
Nah.
So you'd
piss flying.
Yeah. If you have a penis, like you're just standing in the middle of Hyde Park with your penis out. It's just really weird. It's really weird. I mean, half of them have their penis out because that's their costume anyway. But, you know, for me, a bit confronting having to do that. This year has been a very interesting year, and I really couldn't talk. We planned to do this episode surrounding Mardi Gras. We actually already recorded this episode about 2 weeks ago by the time this goes live. And that was before a lot of the things that have happened, and it just didn't make sense for those thoughts and feelings to go live. So we had to kind of scramble here and re-record the episode that you're listening to right now, because it has been such a full-on week or 2 weeks for the community, given the loss of Luke and Jesse, who were murdered by a police officer with a government-issued gun. And I, first of all, want to say condolences to any friends or family of those boys who might be listening. Mm-hmm. I also want to say that for anyone with maybe children in the car, or if, violence or death or anything like that triggers you, maybe either listen to this without the kids in the car, or maybe come back to this at a different time if you want to. Because here's the thing for me. Since... At this time of recording, the police have been uninvited from participating in the Mardi Gras parade.
And for those who don't know, they usually have a float, right?
Yes, they usually march in the parade. They don't dance or have a float or have a truck. They just march in their uniform.
Wave. And one thing as well, Matt, that I feel like a lot of people would be interested to know, which you've kind of educated me on, is what Mardi Gras actually is and what the march and the parade is. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't really know the history of it. Like, I would just hear Pride and Mardi Gras and the parade and festival and just think, oh, like, amazing. Like, this is fantastic. But I think what a lot of people wouldn't know is the history behind how it came to be. So for those listening that maybe don't know like how I didn't, do you want to fill everyone in on kind of the history?
For sure, because I have posted about my support for not having police at Pride this year. And my DMs were filled with a lot of people who were saying things like, well, I have an auntie, I have a friend, I have a brother, I have a sister, I have someone in my life who's a police officer, and I disagree, and why is this such an issue? And the media has kind of portrayed this situation with those two boys being murdered so recently during the time of Mardi Gras. It kind of makes it look like that one incident is the reason that they've been uninvited. However, that one incident is just the tip of the iceberg of issues that we have. A lot of people don't realise we every single year ask the police not to participate in, and when I say we, I just mean people in the queer community. Not everyone, but like there is a large number who support police being there. There's a large number that don't.
Yep.
I'm in the camp that supports the don't. And we're going to get into those reasons why. I also have direct family members who are police officers, who are amazing police officers, and I believe are good people, but they work for a system that is broken at the end of the day. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. So gather around the campfire, everyone, because Mama's got a little bit of a history lesson for you. Because a lot of people have DM'd me, first of all, being a bit like, offended or disappointed is the word that a lot of people use. They're disappointed in my view on this. And then when I actually explain to them and give them the context and they actually use their critical thinking skills, they go, oh no, that actually makes so much sense. So it's about just opening your ears, listening, and then making maybe a different decision. And maybe you'll feel the same way or maybe you won't. And hopefully you just learn something today. But basically, how did Mardi Gras start? Well, I'm sure you may have heard about the Stonewall riots, which were in New York. It was a protest and a riot by the queer community in 1969. So Stonewall back then, in 1969, being gay was illegal. You couldn't be gay. You couldn't show yourself being gay. You had to pretend to be straight or you'd be arrested and usually bashed by police. So Stonewall, the club, was actually owned by the mafia at the time because it was illegal to have gay people in your club.
Which is so twisted.
Yeah, so the mafia owned the club and they allowed gay people to come in.
Right.
At this time, though, they still didn't allow a lot of other people from the community to be in the club. But in this particular night, the police were always raiding clubs, the gay clubs, always raiding the gay clubs, going in, and of course owned by the mafia. They're trying to look for a range of things, but they'd be quite violent. They'd just arrest people for no reason. There's a lot of police brutality. And this one night at Stonewall, they just had enough. And a riot broke out and they were like, no, you're not going to do this to us anymore. And there was a lot of unlawful arrests, violence. The queer community just, was used to taking it because that was the law. But when they raided Stonewall on June 28, 1969, by the way.
Which isn't that long ago.
No, that's just 1 year before the 70s started,
Yeah.
And they finally fought back. That was the first time that gay people or queer people had fought back. And it was the start of the gay liberation movement. And so in 1978, which was the 9-year anniversary of the Stonewall riots, there was an anti-gay bill being passed in California, and protests were starting around the US. And then Stonewall actually put out a call worldwide, and they sent letters to activists everywhere to protest in their own cities to drum up attention about the bill in California to hope that it wouldn't pass. And so they reached out to a group in Sydney who decided they would protest. They got a permit from the council and permission from the police, and that will come into play a little bit later. But they got permission to do their march and their protest from Taylor Square up in on Oxford Street, which is where now the Mardi Gras parade happens. But Taylor Square and down the street towards Hyde Park. Now the parade goes from Hyde Park up the street and through Taylor Square and kind of ends a little bit further down the road. But back then, that's what they did. So a group of around 500 people decided they would protest. They got permission. They protested in the morning and then that night held a parade, party, protest. It was still a protest, but it was more a celebration, look at
what we've done.
Look at what we've done, just to drum up a bit more noise. Again, they had a permit to do that. And legally, they marched and drove from Taylor Square down to Hyde Park. When they got to Hyde Park, police had set up a trap and actually surrounded the entire group. And the people protesting realised that they were trapped and this had all been a bit of a setup and the police were waiting for them and started, being violent, they yelled to the cross, which is King's Cross. And so they then ran, marched, walked however they could get there to King's Cross, which is, maybe a kilometre walk away, I guess, at a guess. And the whole time they were shouting out of the bars and onto the streets, out of the bars and onto the streets. And people were, for the first time in Australia at least, coming out of the bars as allies to march with the people who were running away from the police, and people were getting behind them. And this is why allyship is so important, because things change and things happen when, we can only yell and scream so much as queer people. We need our allies to get on board as well, because unfortunately we live in a world where that is what we need. If you've never been to King's Cross, by the way, back in the day, it's kind of weird these days. I don't really know how to describe it now, but back in the day, it was the place where a lot of outcasts would go, a lot of queer people, sex workers, etc. That was like their hub. That was where they hung out. There were a lot of sex clubs. There still are sex clubs, strip clubs, whatever you want to call them these days. But that's where they ran because it was almost like a bit of a safe space. So they got there. A lot of people had joined them. Now a group of 2,000 people at a guess. They got to King's Cross. The police were waiting there for them because they had all radioed in when they heard them say to the cross at Hyde Park. And they just started going absolutely mental, arresting everyone in sight, beating everyone in sight. They chucked them all in Darlinghurst Police Station, which, spoiler alert, has now been absolved because it was actually so corrupt and so bad. And they actually found that this was all very unlawful, and they just fired everyone in the department and shut down the whole police station.
That's insane.
Like, that's what happened because it was so bad. You know what I mean? Imagine a whole police station having to be
shut down
because what you're doing, and it wasn't just to these people on this night, it was all the time. So they were chucked in Darlinghurst Police Station, continually beaten in inhumane conditions, not allowed to use the bathroom. They're covered in blood. They had their clothing removed. I want to use the term they were treated like animals, but like, who would even treat an animal like that? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It was really disgusting. And I did in World Pride, I did a tour with some of the 78ers, which is what we call these people who marched in 1978. And dealt with this. I met some of them, went on like a little bus tour around the city, and we went to all the places and spaces, and still the trauma that they experienced that night. We went to Darlinghurst Police Station, stood out the front, and they recounted their memories of that night, crying, not able to speak, very triggered by all of this that had gone on because of the police. But it didn't stop there. The Sydney Morning Herald on the Monday morning published the names of everyone who was arrested, full names, addresses, other information, ages, leading to everyone basically who got arrested to be outed in a world where it's illegal to be gay. So people who were posted in the Sydney Morning Herald lost their jobs, lost their families, people didn't want to be associated with them, if they were renting a house, their landlord kicked them out because it was illegal to be gay. So if your name was in the paper,
see you later,
your life was ruined.
Wow.
And still to this day, the Sydney Morning Herald is still writing really problematic things. And there have been protests as recent as the last couple years as to how they describe trans people or talk about trans people, or opinion pieces or things that they publish that are still just as harmful. And this is kind of the overarching theme of this, is like, wow, it's so crazy that they published all those names. Honey, those things, similar outcomes are still happening to this day. Mm-hmm. And that goes for the way that the police treat the queer community, but we'll get there. So they continued protesting yearly on the anniversary. They grew in numbers, then they grew in spectators. People would come and watch them protest. Maybe not protest, but come and support them and watch. And so on and so forth. That's what turned into what we know now as the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras, and it's been a whole thing.
Which is, I feel like I would be interested to hear how many of our listeners didn't know that.
Yes.
Because I'll put my hand up and say, like, I didn't know that was a history of Mardi Gras at all. Like,
yes.
I never knew that.
Yes. And And if you want more information, because I have kind of just skimmed over the finer details there, please, I implore you, this weekend, it's Mardi Gras. It's the perfect time to do some research. The 78ers website, feel free to make a donation while you're there if you feel inclined. You can find a lot of information on the Sydney Mardi Gras website and also just a simple Google search. If you're more of a visual learner, there's a documentary on Netflix called Between a Frock and a Hard Place. I definitely recommend it. It's about the making of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, but they do really go into the 78ers and the time that they were living in whilst filming the movie. And so this brings me to talking about police at Pride. And when I posted my request for no police at Pride, I'm always met with usually straight people who are usually unaware of this stuff and usually say things like, you know, I've got friends who are cops and they're great. And as I said, I have direct family members too, and I know that they are the, in quotations, good guys. Unfortunately, I also know that the system that they work for is broken and the system needs to change. And by working as a police officer, whether intentionally or not, whether they're a good person or not, whether they've never been even arrested anyone, even if it's their first day on the job, they are still upholding a system that is built to harm not just queer people, but a lot of minorities. Onto the issue of like police at Pride, it really isn't a black and white issue and it's very complex and not something I can fully cover in one podcast episode. So again, I'm encouraging everyone to do their research. And I'm also encouraging everyone to use their critical thinking skills when we talk about this. But police brutality is still alive and well in our community. If you think what I just spoke about was disgusting, like similar things are still happening to this day. I've seen it with my own eyes. You don't hear about it because no one cares. Like no one's writing, the media isn't writing about this unless it's a sensationalized thing that garners a lot of attention. And because it happens so often, it's like not interesting to the media. You know what I mean? No one listens until you have to. And thankfully, like people at the moment are hearing what we're saying. I just hope they're listening to what we're saying, if you know what I mean by the difference there. So for many people, the presence of police at Pride betrays the memory of Stonewall to begin with. And also that night in Sydney on Oxford Street, that first night. I will say as well, the next year when they marched as a memory of the year before, they had an incident-free event. I will say, like, nothing happened there. But it can be particularly traumatic. As I said, the 78ers were standing outside the police station crying. It's still very triggering to them. So when people say, like, well, what's the problem with having cops at Pride? Well, it's because the whole reason we're even there is because of the police.
Yeah.
The whole reason we're even marching is because of the police. We are treated so poorly by them, and it's like, it's just a bit of an eye roll is the best way I can describe it. It's an eye roll to have police there in uniform marching saying, we salute you, we love you, we are proud to be in this community, we support you, we are here to show our support. You don't show your support anywhere else. Not as good as you can, and maybe not you specifically as a police officer, but the system as a whole is what we mean there. So to help us dive deeper into this conversation, I'm bringing in one of my good friends, Milo Hartill.
Hey,
Hello,
folks.
Joel.
Hi.
Welcome.
Illy.
This is our first guest, by the way.
You are our first guest on this podcast.
Oh my God, it's an honour. Oh, it's just really honoured to be nominated.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
It is so exciting to have you here. If you're not familiar with Milo, did you want to give yourself a little introduction? Because I wrote a few things, but I'll see if you can tick them all off anyway.
I'm a model, an actor, a content creator, and an activist.
Yep.
I like to talk a lot of shit,
Yep.
and I like to talk a lot of politics.
Yep.
I am that fat diva on the internet.
Yep.
And I don't know, I'm a black lady who has fun, and I'm from Perth. And I'm gay.
I had like all of that, except also a nice little nod to you hosting the opening ceremony of World Pride last year.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, it ties in well that we're talking about this topic today.
I met Kylie.
Oh,
That
no,
was
don't. You can
crazy.
leave now,
Stop.
actually. We don't need you here.
She said I have
Sorry.
nice hair, and then I cried.
Aw.
It's so embarrassing.
That's Matt's
Hello.
dream right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally. I need Kylie Minogue to tell me I have nice hair.
It was
And
as she
then-
walked, she stopped and she went, oh, nice hair. And I went,
Oh! She's so cool, honestly.
Literally.
And so are you. I love following you, and you continuously teach me a lot. I love that you, first of all, entertain, but then second of all, educate really well on a lot of topics, specifically, obviously, as having lived experience as a black person. Also, obviously, the war currently happening in with Israel and
Palestine,
Gaza, Palestine. And I've learnt a lot from you and following you. So thank you for that. Another thing that I've seen in the last couple of weeks, and the reason that I wanted you to join us today, was that you also have been vocal about the police not being, at this time of recording, they've been removed and uninvited from marching in the Mardi Gras parade. And, you know, in this episode, we've been discussing that it's a much deeper issue than just what's been happening recently in the media. But to start off, first of all, I just want to know, as a person of colour, what does celebrating Pride mean to you and how is it different?
I mean, I think being a person of colour at most Pride celebrations in Australia is a very strange place to be in. I mean, I love Pride. I'm the first person that's like, "Are you coming to Mardi Gras? It's so much fun. We're going to like party and dance and be silly and gay and kiss girl and la-di-da-di-da."
Yeah.
Or boy, or non-binary person, ally. But I feel like in Australia it is really not for people of colour. I think it's getting better every year, and especially with the ballroom community in Australia booming at the moment. Like, I remember a few years ago, I was like, I didn't even really know what ballroom was, other than like I watched Paris is Burning and that show with the
Pose.
Yes, and Pose, so good. That one scene in it where the black boys are kissing. Whew. Oh, me and my housemate in lockdown. Rewind. But yeah, I think it's a strange in between of like wanting to really represent well for people of colour, especially when, you know, being a media-ish person, a host, performer, you know, I'm asked to represent a lot. So that's...
Like today, like we're guilty of that, asking you to come here and
Yeah.
represent, and so...
But I mean, it's a weird in between of like, I'm really glad that we're at a point now where we are being invited to the table, but sometimes it's like, oh no... Like, I'll look at like a huge panel of people and be like, I'm the only fat person and the only black person and the only gay person. All right, fingers crossed I say the right things. We'll find out. But yeah, I think it's getting more inclusive and diverse. I mean, it's funny to say that in a celebration like Pride, because you would think it would tick all the boxes already. But as we all know, I mean, anyone who goes to a Pride event, it's kind of like, is this for the queers or is this for the white muscle gays, you know? And I feel like we're stepping towards the queers inch by inch, which is good.
So we're getting there.
We're getting there. I would say we're getting there.
Slowly but surely.
It's like, I feel like at the moment we're in the 2 steps back of the progression.
You know what? It's so funny you say that, because I felt like that's the aura for the last like 6 months, is
Yeah.
we were making some really good progress.
Yeah.
And somehow, somewhere in the last 6 months or so, we have taken 10 steps back as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it was like 2020, COVID happened, Black Lives Matter happened, Biden got voted in, and it was like, oh my God, this is it. We're taking the step forward. And now you can just feel the pendulum swinging back the other way to then go forward. But I think it was always going to happen. I remember like 2022 end of, I was like, wow, things have been going good for a really long time. I am not going to hold my breath. And here we are.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things I think is because people are so divided on certain topics. The topic, of course, at the moment is police being uninvited from marching in the Mardi Gras parade, and just police involvement in general.
Yeah.
I think like when these sorts of things are spoken about, people get very divisive, and that is how those steps back start to happen.
Absolutely.
I just want to know, in your own words, can you tell us why not allowing the police to march at Mardi Gras is such a huge request, not only this year, but every year that Pride happens?
Well, obviously, as you've spoken about on the podcast already, like Stonewall was a riot. The first Mardi Gras was a protest, and like, I don't know, even if you remove the association of the police from actual Mardi Gras as the event marching, or in Pride, for example, in Midsummer, just a few weeks ago, there was a huge punch up with protesters of the police marching and the police, which was like, don't go look for it if you haven't seen it. But some of the videos that came out of that, I was like, do people really need any more evidence of why we don't want police at Pride? But I feel like, you know, I've heard a lot of rhetoric that is like, you don't get it. My auntie is a lesbian and she's a cop. My husband is a cop and he helped me come out as gay. Da 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 da. And I'm like, your husband was not born a cop. Like, your husband chose to be a cop. It was like the same rhetoric as during Black Lives Matter when people started posting Blue Lives Matter. It's like, I was born black. I was born gay. I am someone whose body is predisposed to being fat. Like, those are things that I don't have control over. They are a part of who I am. The career I choose is not something that you get to weaponize against me feeling unsafe against a system that has been built to control and imprison and be violent towards a lot of the core identity markers that I am associated with. Like, in the US, the police were started as the slave patrol. And, you know, here we see the harrowing effect that the justice system has, not on everyone. Like, we see how badly domestic violence is policed and looked after, and where the actual aid for help actually comes from the police system, which is very rare. And I mean, as a domestic violence survivor myself, it's like, hey, can you help? It's like, has he tried to kill you? No. Let us know when he does.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. I think people also don't take into account the effect that police presence has on making people of colour feel safe at these events. I never feel safe. You know, I had lots of people I made a post being like, no cops at Pride, and I had lots of people meet me with, the police made me feel safe at Pride, and every single one of those people were white and thin. Mm-hmm. And I was like, surely you've got to see the theme here. Of course you feel safe with police at Pride. You're not the one that's going to get arrested if a riot goes out.
And the system is set up to make those people feel
safe. It's like, it's funny to me, people are like, you saying no cops at Pride makes my cop boyfriend feel excluded. Okay, well, how about the system that your cop boyfriend chose to be a part of, even after seeing all of the harrowing effects that the system has had? I think people as well don't take into account, like, when we say ACAB and when we say defund the police, it's not saying that, like, it's like not all men, you know? Like, obviously, when I say I'm afraid of men, I don't mean all men. I have a granddad and he's awesome. I have best friends who are men. I love them. But them being good people doesn't make the patriarchy serve me as a femme person, as someone that doesn't suit the social ideal. That in the same way that your good cop husband, I can't guarantee that he is going to be the one marching next to me at Pride, can I, Judy? Like, I wish I could. If you can make that happen for me, Judy, then maybe I'll take the post down. But for now, like, I just as well, like, sorry, I have so many thoughts.
No, please.
But it's like the system is never going to make certain individuals, people that are a part of marginalised groups, feel safe because it was designed to police them and make them feel unsafe. Mm-hmm. There's not a reality where police are going to make everyone feel safe. And that's why things like ACAB and defund the police are statements that so many people believe so staunchly that are a part of marginalised communities. Because it's like, I don't want every single cop, the good and the bad, to be without a job, because alas, we live in this capitalist hellscape. But, you know, we need to make systems that are looking to help people. You know, like even looking at the guy from the army who set himself on fire in the US, like the fact that the police response was to pull a gun on him is insane. Like, there needs to be like mental health resources going there. There needs to be people that are looking for the other side of when somebody gets in trouble with the police. There needs to be more effort to have police that are people of colour. Are all police being trained in diversity and inclusivity? Are police being checked for things like stalking, for example, or if they've tased someone in the face in the past with their uniform on? Mm-hmm. How are the guns being managed in a way that you can say not go home and shoot people? Like, there's just so many issues, and I think that people choosing to take a stance of being offended that the police were asked not to be in Mardi Gras, especially coming off the back of the harrowing events of this week, especially during Mardi Gras. I just struggle to fathom that someone's take would be, it's really sad that the police aren't allowed to be at Pride when we've been blocking other people from feeling safe at Pride for decades.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my thesis statement. I think as well, just while there's space in the air, just like, I feel like it would be great for anyone listening to Google what false equivalence is, and that is like equating two things that are incomparable. Like, I remember during Black Lives Matter, the rhetoric of Blue Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter. It was like, a blue life doesn't exist. Being a cop is a job. You can take off your uniform. I cannot take off my skin. Being black is not a uniform for me. In the Black Lives Matter protests in Perth, I got catcalled by the police. I had my ass slapped by a policeman, and I was a marshal. And I grew up in a middle-class home in WA. I've got a really Aussie accent. I don't speak any other languages. I'm light-skinned. I have the privilege of being able to dress the way I dress. I fit in every other sense of the word with white Australian society, with the way I speak, the references I have, the jokes I make. And still, I was the one that was singled out from all of the other marshals, all of my friends. And I think it really speaks to, like, firstly, that racism and homophobia and is so unfounded, but also that, like, there are just things about me that are going to make me targets of police violence, police brutality, of the system blaming me or taking people that are like me and that look like me, and that includes queer people as well, and making us the martyrs of whatever event it is that we're shouting the loudest for, because we know what it's like to be marginalised. And there are things like that's just, I can't change that about me. Whereas, like, if you're a police officer and you're desperate to make it down to Mardi Gras, doll, nobody is stopping you from putting on the bloody rainbow hat and marching away.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not.
And that's another good point, is like, your workplace does not guarantee you a spot in Mardi Gras. Like, you know, here at Nova, if they don't do a float, like, then I have to go and find a different organisation or someone else who wants to work with me or invite me onto their float. If the cops can't march and that's the decision, we'll go and join a charity or another community. Figure it out, because that's what everybody has to do, right? I do want to, though, just quickly, because I know we've got to wrap this up and you're a very busy lady this Mardi Gras season, but I would love to know whether you think there's is there any way for them to be there? Perhaps some people are suggesting not to be in uniform, because the thing is, they wear their uniform and march, and that's what can be triggering and what can be a bit of an eye roll. Do you think a New South Wales police float where they're not in uniform, or do you think just dissolve the whole thing?
I think maybe in like 10 years' time, when we've sorted the system out, we've gotten rid of the flaws that criminalise queer people and people of colour and make people feel ostracised by that system, maybe there is a place for them. That's like the same argument as people are like, do you reckon white people could play black people in musicals? I'm like, in like 20 years when we've like really succeeded with getting rid of racism, then yes, my queen Tabitha, you are going to slay it as Effie in Dreamgirls. But for now, step down.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just like, if you punch someone in the face, you can't be like, why don't you want me to be your friend anymore? Like, it's like, because we've got to work this out. You've got to fix the system from the inside out. And I think that's got to come from more queer people of colour, queer trans people of colour being invited into spaces with police. I think there's got to be a real overhaul on how the justice system works at its core. I mean, even like, you know, people like even the system to report things that have happened is stressful and hard to maneuver. And like I'm in a court case at the moment with something I reported in 2020. It's still going. And like, that's coming from me, who I feel comfortable talking up for myself, and I feel comfortable in my communication skills, and I feel comfortable with being able to hold my own in a police system, as I really do benefit from colorism and having a completely white family. Like, there's just so much at core that is flawed with the system that I feel like it would be, and especially with the events of this week, it would just be so disrespectful and distasteful for there to be a New South Wales police float at Pride, and a whichever state police force float at any of the Prides.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And just to clarify for our audience, are we just talking about police marching in the celebrations? Do the same things apply to police who are working there to keep the crowds safe, in quotation marks? Are we saying here no police at Pride full stop? Even we don't even want police who are on duty, because I mean the eye roll is that they don't really keep us safe regardless, but taking that out of the equation, what is the premise here? Is it don't march with us, or is it don't be there at all?
I'm such a commie, lefty, abolitionist diva that I'm like, fuck the system. But I do recognise that police presence does make some people feel safer, and obviously want people to feel safe at Pride. So if there are happy, safe, not homophobic cops that would be willing to be there to actually represent for community and actually keep community safe on Mardi Gras, then props to you. Get your bag, working your job, and do your job properly, and don't be problematic. Sleigh boots, happy for you, represent, wear your little rainbow pin on your uniform. I'm not going to accost you, but I think my thoughts are, for the people that want to feel protected in the way of police, then police that are willing to be there and make people feel safe should be there. But maybe there's like a sensitivity check beforehand of like, are you going to be hateful because you weren't allowed to march this year, Dave? Yes? Don't come, King.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's where I stand. I think commie lefty, right, like left-wing baby in me is like, yeah, fuck them, don't come. But the part of me that is media trained says, yes, I absolutely think that there should be people there making us feel safe.
Yeah. Nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We so appreciate you coming on to share all of this with us, educate us a little bit, and our scrollers. If people want to find you, I know you've got a show coming up soon. Tell us about that, and where are you on socials?
On socials, you can find me at That Fat Diva or Milo Hartill. And I do have a show coming up called BFF, which I don't know what you're allowed to say on the air, so maybe look up
anything.
Black, Fat and Faggy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's happening from the 3rd to the 13th of April in Sydney at the Old Fitz Theatre. And it'll be me singing and talking shit. And I don't know if any of y'all are interested in hearing about my yeast infection, then you can come and hear about it there.
Oh, I'll be there, Joel. Thank you to Milo for being so generous and coming on our podcast today. I think as well, the other thing that just needs to be made clear is that I think you probably have realised by now is this situation, a lot of people are saying the situation of the 2 gay men who were murdered by a police officer is kind of what's in the media at the moment and seems to be the reason they've been uninvited. And again, I just want to reiterate that like there's a long history here and it's not that black and white. I think the New South Wales Police Commissioner saying, you know, that she didn't really take responsibility for him at first being a police officer, you know, saying it was a crime of passion, when now it's come out they were never even in an actual relationship.
How
it was
can
not
you say that a murder is a crime of passion?
It's baffling.
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? These little tiny things that people think are just throwaway comments or not going to cause such a fuss. Look at the fuss it's made. And this is what we mean. The police and the system are not doing these individual actions. Although they're all different levels of severity, they all add up to one big fucking iceberg that the Titanic's about to hit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And she's doing her best. I feel for her. I watch her on the news and I think, you poor thing, having to do this, because at the end of the day, what she needs to be saying is this is a disgusting act by a police officer. But again, she can't say that because it's PR. She got to keep the...
what a fucking sticky situation to be in.
Right? And I understand that.
And she would probably want to be,
Yes.
like, if she is a decent human
Yes.
of any kind, she'd be wanting to say, this situation is absolutely fucked for the police.
Yes.
But she can't say that.
And any brand or department or government body would be doing the same thing.
Like trying to
You
tiptoe
gotta-
around it.
And the thing is, you got to put yourself first, and you got to,
She
but that
lose
is
her
exactly
job.
the problem that we're talking about here. It's a bit of an eye roll to march in solidarity when you won't condemn one of your own, when you really need to stand up and do that. You know what I mean? So...
Look at you go, Matt.
Oh, babes, like, if I had the energy, I would be so much more of an activist. I'm so passionate about these things, obviously. And this is something that has deeply affected me. I didn't know the two boys, but it has been one of the most upsetting things to happen to me in a while because it is one so close to home. And it's just consuming my entire life right now. I also feel really sorry for police officers who are queer, and maybe they were going to be marching in this weekend's Mardi Gras in the New South Wales police float, and they were very excited for this.
Yeah.
Potentially it was their first time at Mardi Gras, I don't know, but they would have felt very proud and very excited. And regardless of the issue, like, that can be very upsetting, so I feel for them. But I also want to say they should know more than anyone how much sense this decision makes. And at the time of recording, I want to say, I know there's meetings going on and things like that. Right now, the police are not involved and not welcome at Mardi Gras this weekend. They are having some meetings, and that could change. And I hope it gets sorted out and we come to some sort of agreement. But my thing today I just wanted to give people a bit of background because
I think it's important too.
Yeah, my DMs are just full of people not knowing the full story and going, trying to stand with the police officers and blah, 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 which is like, whatever. I get that that's your first initial reaction. But with everyone that I've spoken to, and I describe a lot of this stuff in a lot less detail, they get it really quickly and they go, oh, okay, I understand now. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I hope that that's what people have kind of come to today, hearing from me and Milo. And yeah, I just hope that maybe there's a bit more clarity there. And if you still need some more clarity, if you need some more clarity on the situation, baby, Google's right there. Do some due diligence. And this weekend, it's Mardi Gras. If you want to be an ally and you think you love the queer community, but you are not sure where you sit on the fence with this police situation, keep researching. And hopefully you don't have to come to a decision right now. But, and it doesn't matter if you still, want to support police being at Pride and things like that. But in all honesty, like, to be frank with you and to put my opinion out there, if you read up and you research properly, why would you want to support that? That's all I want to say. But anyway.
Look at you go, Matt.
Yeah. Can't wait for the DMs. Woohoo! Gonna be a big weekend for me. Anyway.
Don't even open your DMs.
If you've listened this far, thank you so much for listening to me waffle on. Sorry, Brittney. Next week we can talk all about fate or something.
I'm happy to be here, Matt.
Yeah, me too. And no matter how you're celebrating Mardi Gras this weekend, I hope you have the best time ever. We are so privileged to live in a country where we get to celebrate something like this. Mardi Gras is my favourite time of year. It is such a time for community. I feel so connected to my community at this time of year compared to any other time of year. We all celebrate together, no matter how hard or how light you celebrate. We all come together and have a good time. It's a very safe space. It's a very happy place to be. And whether you are queer or an ally or anything in between, I just hope that this year is such a big celebration and it's everything you want and more. And if you're stuck at home or you're not in Sydney and you're not celebrating, well, I'm sure you can tune in somewhere and watch the parade. This year I'm actually doing something so different and I'm not doing anything at all. It's always a big work time for me. This year I took this year off. I said I don't want to do any work. I actually want to enjoy myself for once.
Good.
So,
good for you.
That's what I'm doing this Mardi Gras. I'm very excited to be surrounded by the love of my community. And I hope everyone else feels it at this time.